Hi, this is Kathy, and you've reached me at my sewing practice. Now, if you're a regular and you come around quite a bit, or if you're a subscriber, or if you're a commenter, you know what you usually see on my videos, and I appreciate you coming back again. If for some reason you have found this video and you've never been here before, I want you to know that today's video is quite a deviation from my normal format. See, Michelle is having a challenge this month of September regarding Alzheimer's awareness and dementia awareness. As part of that, we are sewing things purple. And so in that way, this video is regular. It's gonna be me sewing a garment. I do have this lavender color on. It's called Folk, and it's available at Joann. And I've made it in the Olympia dress and top that is designed by Love Notions. I'm going to show you clips of me constructing and sewing and cutting out this pattern. However, it is not a review. Overlaid on top of that visual footage is going to be an auditory essay read by myself that I wrote regarding the journey that I had with my father, who died at the age of almost 80, but was a victim of Alzheimer's for many, many years before that. So hopefully you'll allow me the grace to deviate from my regular format and listen and watch the video. This is the last you are going to hear from me on this video. However, I will insert a couple pictures of me in my Olympia top. I didn't have enough fabric to make it into a dress. So currently it is a short peplum, but I do have plans to transfer it into a dress. All right, so here's the video. He was born between two world wars, played out his childhood during the Great Depression, and greeted his last child into the world, me, at age 45, and started losing his temper and his memory 10 years later. The hardest thing about losing someone to dementia Alzheimer's is you don't have a hard stop as to when the life ended. I have learned that relationships can still develop long after one of the members of the said relationship is no longer actively contribute. As I age and mature, I reframe my memories. But when did I actually lose my dad? Certainly he was gone long before his death. When your father dies and you are young and now you are in the pre-autumn of your life, you can go days without even thinking about him. But that faded and frequent memory was not the case in 1994. It was during this year we were rehabbing a house, me and my husband. In my mind, my dad was right there with me. The wood smells, the sound of saws, the crack of hammers, and the lath plaster dust. Oh, the dust went everywhere, and permeating into my thoughts were memories of my dad. I desperately wanted to experience this home regeneration with him. I always said he was the only one who learned trigonometry and actually used it. A cabinet maker melds math and craft and wood into functional art with his tools and his intellect. He always said, "You make me a drawing of anything and I will build it for you." This statement, it was similar to a contract. I have leaned into the "you draw it, I make it" deal many times with great success. The wood was his delight, his job, and his love language. As I studied the newel post in my new old house, I couldn't help recall 10 years earlier, the unmet bargain.
I had meticulously drawn the plans for a cabinet complete with hinge doors, extra shelving, creative storage. He built it with the wrong dimensions, the loud and clear signs of dementia. Was it Alzheimer's? It was an assumed diagnosis late in the disease process. I'm not sure he was ever told he had received the diagnosis. But he knew. He knew something was wrong. First, there was the over drinking to drown the crazy. My beloved dad, I had opened many beers, and I knew he was not a drunk. After all, the afternoon beer ritual was part of my childhood memory. He would receive the long neck beer and then offer me the first crisp, cold sip. And then after he would complete the beer, we would play backyard barefoot badminton. No, I don't recall him ever saying he loved me. That wasn't his way or his culture. But he'd play in the backyard with me until dinner on a hot summer afternoon after working outside in the heat all day. That's expressing love. This new change man drank to excess. Then he tried dieting. There were fasts, there was food reduction, and there was cutting white flour and white sugar. This 20th century style clean eating resulted in a family joke. "Dorothy, have you been putting sugar in my oatmeal cookies?" he asked, all the while chomping on the sweets. Before he was old enough to retire, he took a job making displays and exhibitions for an art museum. This simple task for a skilled craftsman who had traveled as part of many church restorations. By his age of 64, this easy job was too much, and he retired. Somewhere along the at-home years, he went to daycare, but my mom was still frazzled. I can't say patience was her strong suit with the good Frank, but she was both falling apart and keeping it all together at the same time. I decided to move home to help. Anyway, I wanted my young son to know the parents of my childhood. So my husband and I sold our house and moved 500 miles back into my childhood home. Soon after, my dad started escaping. My mom had deadbolts installed after 1 or 2 episodes of my husband fetching his father-in-law down on Ross Avenue. Dad was out after dark, inappropriately attired. This bolt installation was the first time in my life my mother hired something out. My dad could fix or make anything, it seemed to me. He flunked the test to receive medication or be in an Alzheimer's study. That's what my mom always said, flunk the test. Like he couldn't even get having Alzheimer's right. But you see, many years prior, he had fallen 10 or so feet off of a scaffold that had been incorrectly assembled and thereby sustained a head injury. That's pretty ironic for a man who abruptly lost his childhood the day his own father fell to his death, constructing a nuclear cooling tower. Green cement. That's how the story was always told. My child brain had difficulty grasping the concept of green cement, but apparently my grandfather fell when the cement wall gave away. He was probably building the cement wooden form frames. Conversely, I fully embraced the story of how my dad's mother would gather up her 7 children and go uptown on roller skates. My dad loved recounting that story. After the tragic death of his father, as the eldest, he had to quit high school and earn to keep the family going. He graduated night school. But his children would be well educated, he promised himself. It was the era of the space race now, and everything was affected by this challenge. Science was pushed in the schools, and my dad concluded engineering was the profession to behold. His two oldest were boys, and they became engineers. Check. The next girl had a big heart, a nurse. He hated the medical profession ever since they let his younger brother die of cancer, but she was called to be a nurse, so okay. The next girl, engineer. Check. I'm next. Clash. Part of Dad's formula was to never give his children the option not to go to college. But he knew he couldn't fund it, so he'd have his child work throughout high school. An engineering college has the added benefit of a well-paid internship called co-op. Don't forget he had work and never took government aid. Pull up the bootstraps and all that. But you see, the 70s were the awakening of our nation. Equality was being demanded in and from the streets. Title IX came about to give women and men a more equal playing field in college athletics. I decided I wanted to break the work for money mold and get a swimming scholarship. But it would take dedication and countless hours in the pool, a stark contrast to standing behind a nameless cash register for minimum wage. He bucked, I cried. He yelled, I reasoned. He disapproved. He was losing his mind, and I dug in, and I didn't lose the battle. I got the scholarship. All the while, I was losing my dad. We chuffed. I felt unloved and misunderstood. We never resolved the conflict. The dementia was the biggest winner. He refused to walk me down the aisle. It sounds so much worse than it was, but he approved of my previously married fiancé less than of my swimming. He always stuck to his beliefs. It was admired back then. It is only happenstance he died the year I was cherishing his memory and yearning for my old dad. The childhood dad that laughed so much his eyes crinkled in the corners. The dad that raced you to the door and then ran funny. The dad that was on my left throughout all the spilt milk, warm meals, and in the car to the lumber yard. The dad that declared he was blessed because his work was also his hobby. The family man. On the backs of this kind of man, the middle class of America was built. He bowled, he smoked, he served in the Pacific, he attended church religiously, never got sick, seldom got injured, was faithful to all. The warm man of the fragrant, cozy, inviting workshop. The builder of many family houses, the creator of most of the furniture in our home, and the maker of everything down to our poker chips. The man who taught math with his folding ruler, recycled before recycling was cool, and mapped out routes to his young drivers with knives, forks, spoons, and salt shakers at the dinner table. That was the dad I missed as I scraped wallpaper, calculated miter corners, and restored windows. I always thought it was ironic the house me and my husband rehabbed was originally built the year Dad was born, 1914. Those years between the Great Wars, before the Great Recession, and while horses were given away to the great invention of the car and assembly line. But how would a healthy man without an intact mind actually physically die? I'll tell you. He gets a bladder infection that rapidly runs up into his kidneys and bloodstream. Next, the infection renders the body septic to the point antibiotics can no longer help. I was with my mom that fine sunny Sunday. After she got the call from the nursing home, we met my dad at the hospital. A few hours later, he glances at my mom with actual recognition. Then he lifts his hand. He looks with the rheumy eyes towards the wall, and his spirit leaves his body. The funeral was sweet and nostalgic, and I cried like a tormented mourner. My dad had been released of his body. I wish I could say I was released of the cruelty of losing a father slowly to Alzheimer's.